Well, I just got back from a weekend 18th century scout or trek. It's like a backpacking trip, if you will, and along with some friends. And in order to make this much harder on myself, I decided to take my 6-year-old sons on their very first backpacking trip. And we did it all in colonial American style. And today on the Deerskin Diary, I'm going to walk you through my planning process, what we carried with us and what worked and what I would do differently next time. So stick around. Actually, there's nothing catchy in this one. It was no joke. So a quick note about this video. This topic was never designed to be in video format. I did not have that idea until I got back and realized that there were so many things that I learned and it might be valuable for someone else. So this is not going to be like a traditional Deerskin Diary video. I simply didn't take that much video. I have some old stock footage that I'll throw in here and a bunch of still shots. It may look a little bit more like a slideshow than normal. But the biggest reason for that is because I also don't want this project that I love to do so much to ever turn into something that my kids think is just the only reason that I create these experiences. I don't want them to turn and look at me and see me looking back at them through the fisheye lens of a camera every time. Now this trip was about nothing more than just having fun. I carried a lot more with me on this trip than I ever would have carried before, and the biggest reason for that is I wanted to make sure on their first trip that I had a number of options if things got dark and scary at night, if there was boredom setting in, obviously hunger. I wanted to make sure I had more than enough, and I wanted to make sure that they were also items that the boys were comfortable with, things that weren't too far of a deviation from their normal 21st century life. And I'm going to share with you the items that I carried with me in order to make their experience both authentic and comforting. Now, I also had conversations with them about snakes and bears. We were in bear country, as well as yellow jackets and poison ivy and all the things that could make even a simple overnight trip uncomfortable. So I wanted to make sure they understood the magnitude of what we were going to try to do, but I also wanted to caution that with not scaring them too much. I've taught my kids all about, snakes and poison ivy and bears and animals and things like that, so they're not mysterious to them. But that's a whole other story when you encounter them in the wild unexpectedly. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about is the equipment that I selected for myself and for the boys and how we carried it. All right, let's talk standard clothing and equipment loadout, things that I carried with me. So first up, I want to talk about the standard clothing and equipment that I chose to take with me on this trip. I'll start with the clothing. I've got heavy wool socks, linen trousers, a linen body shirt, and I went with my linsey woolsey hunting shirt for this particular trip because it's been an odd August here in the South, and some of the mornings have been relatively cool. I wanted just a little bit more potential protection. That was actually overkill. I didn't need it, so next time I'll likely just go with my regular linen hunting shirt. Now, footwear, I went with the shoe packs. It's like a shoe pack is a common term for it. They're really nothing more than, colonial or American-made moccasin style, but they have an extra sole sewn on the bottom. Now, these particular shoe packs have a sole that is rough out. You can hopefully see it in the light there. You'll see how that leather's kind of rough on the bottom. That tends to add a tiny bit more friction than a pair of standard moccasins or certainly shoes. Now, one of the reasons that I went with these is because of the traction, but the other one is because that heavier sole on the bottom there like that doesn't cause me to turn or twist my foot if I were to step on something sharp like a rock or a stick when I'm wearing moccasins. And I was concerned about the amount of weight that I needed to carry on my upper body, and so I wanted to give my feet every opportunity to both have traction and not allow my body to overreact to something that I stepped on. So these were a good choice. I would definitely do that again. We were in bear country, so I opted to take my trusty 54 caliber flintlock along with a very full 1.5 pound of gunpowder in this horn. I just made this recently. It's the first and only horn I've ever made. but it started as a raw horn, and I handmade everything, including the strap, and did the scrimshaw. So I am proud of it. I was a glutton for my own punishment, though, and in hindsight, I might have not let ego take the best of me and carried a slightly smaller or lighter weight horn. My shot pouch has all of the same things that you can see in a prior video. I didn't take anything out or add anything to it. It's just always there and ready to go. I didn't take an axe on this trip. I normally try to, but I wanted to not have one more heavy thing to try to figure out a place to put. So I went with a small utilitarian tomahawk like this, you know, designed as a fighting tool, but useful as a camp tool as well. This one cut up several pieces of firewood, some substantial pieces of firewood at that. And of course it has a little pole on the back that I could use for you know, anything that I might need a small lightweight tack hammer for. Sheath knife on my belt. I used this a grand total of once. Half the time this wound up staying in camp or in a pack. I do enjoy a sheath knife for cleaning game, but man, I'll tell you, I'm getting far less enamored with having one with me all the time. It just doesn't seem necessary for the things that I do. Your mileage may vary. And of course, always though, a pocket knife. This is just my little standard cutto or pocket knife that I keep in my pocket nearly everywhere I go, and this does 90% of the work that I need it to do. Let's talk about water carriage for a second. I tend to carry one of these tin-dipped canteens. You know, I have a gourd canteen, I have a wooden canteen, but anytime I'm away from a substantial support mechanism, I always try to carry something pretty robust like this. If I drop it, it's not likely to crack or start leaking water. Has a nice little rigid spout here to it for use with the water filter. So always a good canteen to take trekking. In terms of the support gear that I carry in my pack, first let's start with the pack itself. This is my standard linen canvas, you know, regular style knapsack. It's got 3 buttons across the top, and it kind of just holds or serves as a catch-all for some of the equipment that I need. This is a small red wool bag. I've mentioned it before in my other trekking video I encourage you to check out. And this is where I carry all my modern stuff, right? So modern medications, first aid kit. The consideration though that I made this time when customizing this kit was the addition of medications for the kids. So, you know, a kid dosage of ibuprofen, a kid dosage of allergy medicine, just to have on hand in case we needed it. And I encourage you to consider those same things. I don't like breaking an ibuprofen pill in half and hoping for the best. I'd rather throw a couple of things in there that would help. Water filters. This is the Sawyer squeeze filter. There's actually 2 of them in here. I don't know why I wound up with 2 of them in there, but I did, and a couple of bags, and they're carried in this red wool bag. The intention is that when I'm with my friends, as I was on this trip, we have a certain, you know, standard that we uphold to keep things as colonial and as frontier as possible. And so anything that I pull out during the course of that trip needs to be something where if one of them turned and looked over at me, they wouldn't see me pulling out a plastic Ziploc bag or something like that. So I keep everything in these bags for authenticity's sake. All right, moving right along, standard fire kit. There's nothing exciting about this. Flint, steel, char cloth, some tow. I had some issues with the tow that I had. For some reason, it didn't want to seem to light. I also usually carry a couple of pieces of fat wood in there as well, although not necessary on this trip. There was plenty of pine in the area. Moccasin repair kit. And this is my standard catch-all bag. Has fishing kit, sewing kit, all kinds of different things in there. Extra lengths of rope. These came in very handy because I did carry a tarp shelter with me on this trip, and we'll get into that here in just a few minutes. Now, one thing that I had never carried with me before was the addition of this small folding candle holder. It's reflective tin, and the reason I brought it on this trip with me along with a couple of extra candles was because, you know, the woods can get a little scary at night, especially to young minds. You hear noises, they don't have any walls around them. We didn't set up a traditional tent, and so, you know, having a little bit of light is enough to potentially suppress fears long enough for them to go to sleep. And I wanted to make sure that we had that option. And honestly, I have not researched the commonality or historical accuracy of these, but it did absolutely fit a niche, and it fit it very well. And I would encourage you to think about these. It's kind of like a colonial American nightlight, if you will. In terms of bedding and extra equipment, I wrapped everything up into one very, very large bedding roll. I have a dry shirt here, a dry pair of stockings or socks, my trusty bison wool cap, and a spare pair of moccasins that I could wear around camp if I wanted to. As it stood, I never actually even took off the shoe packs the entire time I was there, even to sleep. Now, in the rest of this bedroll here, I am currently sitting on the large hemp tarp that I made. And I have, as I brought with me, a ground cloth. This is another hand-sewn tarp that I made. This one's actually made of cotton canvas, but it was one of the early ones that I did, and it works perfect for something like a ground cloth or a hasty shelter. I had been watching the weather for quite some time, knew it wasn't going to rain. And then I had one thick wool blanket for myself. And again, that was all rolled up into one giant bundle and carried on a tump line. Total weight of that large bundle was just under 20 pounds, and that is way more than I would ever carry, especially for one simple overnight summer trip. But I had reasons for it on this one. I wanted a roof over my kids' heads. I wanted them to feel the comfort of that shelter around them. I wanted to make sure they stayed dry and clean from any of the moisture on the ground underneath, hence the need for that ground cloth. And I wanted to make sure that we all had our own wool blanket, which would give us options. I could not carry all 3 wool blankets in this. It would have just been simply too much. But it also gave me the opportunity to let them carry some of their own weight. And we'll get into that here shortly when we talk about the equipment that they took. Moving into clothing for the kids. Now, I'm blessed here because through a combination of purchasing and hand-me-downs from friends, I had options. I wanted to make sure I had at least one spare pair of clothes per kid. And I was able to achieve that. So 2 kids style breeches, not the most authentic in the world, more costume quality than anything else. But these were the pair that they wore in to the site because I knew as soon as we got there, they were going to go straight into the creek and these things were going to be soaking wet. So I made sure that they weren't wearing their nicer pair for that endeavor, and it worked out perfect. I had a spare pair of breeches here for each of them that we kept dry, that they were able to put on in camp and sleep in. Had an extra shirt per child here. They wound up going shirtless for most of the afternoon on Saturday, so it worked itself out well, but I was able to line dry the wet shirts and had obviously a pair of dry shirt rather for them to have with them. I had socks for each. These are wool socks. Again, they're not exactly 100% correct colonial American socks, but they're stockings in the colonial American style, and they are made of wool, and it's the best I can do for kids. Kids' clothing is very difficult to come by in a tremendously authentic capacity. And of course, once you do achieve that, you wind up with a kid who outgrows it just a few months later. For footwear, this is another challenging endeavor for kids. I know these are not completely correct 18th century shoes for children, but I peruse Amazon for something that looks pretty close. And then do some modifications with laces and maybe sand them up with some sandpaper or something like that. I know that there are a couple of companies out there that make more authentic shoes for kids, but again, with 3 kids and myself in this hobby, I have to make some sacrifices. Most of the places that we go to for living histories allow us to be barefoot, or we can wear moccasins. And I did carry one spare pair of moccasins per child that they could wear around camp or when their shoes got wet. As it stood, they actually went barefoot for a good portion of the time. They certainly went barefoot in the creek And they were thankful for the moccasins, but not necessarily married to any one particular idea of footwear. As a parent, though, I was pretty concerned about the overall health of their feet. I did have one son who tore off part of his toenail while walking barefoot, and I thankfully had a first aid kit that I could wrap that up with pretty quickly, and he, drove on like nothing had ever happened. But I was concerned that if I had to carry them out, or at least one of them out, I would have to make multiple trips to get the rest of the equipment out. And what was I going to do with the kid that I had to carry out, versus how would I get the equipment out? So I wanted to make sure we didn't have any surprises, at least when it came to feet. So in terms of the equipment that the boys carried, I wanted them to be provided with an experience, but I also wanted them to become a part of the experience themselves. And part of that would be the reward from carrying some of their own equipment into this sort of unknown land over this unknown distance. I wanted to make sure, though, that the equipment I asked them to carry was somewhat heavy, but not being so heavy that they were miserable, and I wound up carrying it anyway. That actually did happen a little bit, but not nearly to the extent that I thought. In terms of water carriage, I bought them their own canteen. They split this one. It's, using my own theory, a kidney-style canteen made of metal, so if they dropped it and when they dropped it, it wasn't going to fall apart like a $3 shirt. I have this goat skin snapsack here. It's a snapsack with a leather strap. I tied a couple of knots in it to make it a little shorter for their smaller bodies. You can pull it tight here and cinch it down. They carried actually their tin cups on the way in, and they carried their spare socks and spare moccasins in this particular bag. So it wasn't too heavy, but it was kind of cool, because who doesn't want to carry stuff in a dead goat bag? Now, last but not least, the blankets, and I designed for them a very simple tump line for these blankets. It's simply made of hemp rope wrapped up. What I would do differently next time, though, is that I would probably make them a more dedicated tump line with a wider shoulder strap. There were some complaints over the thinness of the rope in comparison to the weight of the blanket on their little shoulders, and I don't blame them. That was an oversight on my part, which is why I wound up carrying one or both blankets for a short time, both in and out. But it was interesting, on the way out, one of my sons really wanted to make sure he toted his weight, and he wound up carrying both blankets and the knapsack at one point. So I felt like there was a good sense of accomplishment there. But these blankets, just simple blanket rolls, very easy, and it allowed them to have some ownership of their own warmth and destiny. In terms of food and food preparation, I want to start with this small kettle here. It's a small tin-lined brass kettle. This I always try to carry one of these with me because it's a secondary water purification technique if needed. Just the fact of boiling water for 10 minutes or so makes it certainly a lot cleaner and a lot safer to drink. And it's also good as a cooking utensil. I brought 10 cups for each of the boys so that they would have something to drink out of instead of a canteen. I have my small wooden trencher that I made here. This is poplar. It's not too heavy, along with a twisted wire fork and a small wooden spoon that's around here somewhere. And I've got 2 wooden trenchers and 2 horn spoons for the boys. The trenchers were handy just to have something where they could put their food down if they wanted to, or as a serving dish. And the spoons were pretty arbitrary because I selected foods that were predominantly handheld. Food considerations became one of those things that I took several days to think about, and went through some little bit greater lengths to bring foods that I know that they would eat. And as it stood, I chose well because they literally ate everything I brought, and we ran out of that place definitely on empty. So I took some sausages for lunch and for dinner. These are smoked sausages, easily cooked over a stick over the fire. I mean, what little kid doesn't want to hold something over a fire until it becomes either inflamed or charred and blackened? past the point of wanting to eat it, but here we are, here we were, and it actually worked out pretty well. I would do something similar. These can go for a day or two without refrigeration. Cookies, right? These are ginger cookies, period style cookies, and cookies are one of those things that when the chips are down, or when things just seem like they might be a little crazier than normal, man, pop a good cookie in your mouth, and who's not happy with that? Potatoes, very simple, easy to boil, clean food, and the addition of some salt and pepper to the water when I boil it, I think that's all you need for just a really good potato. So something simple done well, and those turned out to be a pretty good choice. They liked it. Beef jerky, that's store-bought. I cheated on that one, but the boys really do like some beef jerky, so that's always a good snack. I looked over and found one of my two sons trying to eat the entire bag at one point. Peanuts. Now, this is a deviation from authentic colonial American snack food. I don't have any documentation for the eating of roasted peanuts around a fire, but it's, again, one of those comfort things that the boys like. And I found it to be a minor deviation from my norm. But most importantly, again, this was about them. This trip was about more trips in the future. And so I wanted to select things that I could that could pair away or add on to. And of course, apples as well. Not only nutritious, very easy to carry. A couple other small things that I took. I made some biscuits and some country ham, and wrapped those in paper for breakfast on Sunday morning, so I didn't have to cook anything. And really, that's about it. Everything was carried in one of these linen wallets. And I had a separate linen wallet that carried the cooking and eating utensils. Again, way more than I would normally ever carry, but I simply viewed myself as the pack mule for their experience. Now, in terms of activities to kind of keep boredom from setting in, the boys are pretty lucky. I also have a 6-year-old mentality, and I'm always looking for that next fun thing to do. But in this case, the creek provided hours of entertainment, flipping over rocks to look for crawfish and salamanders, and looking for fish, and just all the kinds of things that kids like to do. The ability, it's summertime, the ability to sort of, take a little swim if they want to in that creek. Creek's very clean. It's where we got our water from. But I also had a couple of other things to do if they got bored. Fire making kits to practice some of those skills. Just some other things. I didn't bring any games or anything this time. I figured there would be enough entertainment in the woods. And of course, the final entertainment that they love the best, broken sticks. Yep, that's right, broken sticks. Sticks to hit stumps with, sticks to hit other sticks with, sticks to hit each other with, sticks to hit me with, sticks to hit the other adults with. Just, the general fun of a good broken stick. And as luck would have it, we actually brought some home. So no one told me as a parent that I would have this second shot at childhood, and that's really a big motivator for me in terms of bringing my kids out to some of these different events and bringing my love of history and the outdoors together for them, and most importantly, with them. I want to throw a special thanks out there to Ty and William and Ken and the others who planned this trip, and more importantly, allowed the boys to go on their first trip like this. As always, I appreciate your grace and patience as you put up with this sort of thrown together video, but I felt really motivated and encouraged to get this video out so that some of you with kids and grandkids and nieces and nephews that you want to bring out to these events, but you're not sure where to start. Hey, I didn't know what to do either, and I just sort of pieced it all together, what I would like to do, and then threw in some authentic or period correct materials, and then just sort of made it happen, and the magic of childhood filled in the rest. So once again, thanks for watching. Get out there and make your own way, and we'll see you next time on the Deerskin Diary.